What's up, boys?
Hey guys, I'm a little bit under the weather, so my voice is kind of hoarse, but give you a little update here. So we're working on trying to fit the fuel cell cage in the rear seat of the car. You can see it in there. I was hoping the 12-gallon fuel cell would fit, and it's just not going to fit. I've been measuring and looking at it and trying to figure out how I can sit it just right, and I just can't do it with the amount of room I have. You really need a 10-gallon tank. I believe Fuel Safe makes one that'll work for this setup. I know Radium Engineering makes a fuel cell setup that works perfect for that spot. So I got to come up with something else. A lot of people will put the fuel cell right here in the trunk. I don't really like that idea, just because anytime if I were to hit a wall, you're at least down $2,000 if you hit the fuel cell. And the back half of these cars, not half, but the back section, you can basically wreck up to here and saw this all off. And then 2F Performance and Street Fighter LA, some other companies that make over fenders, they make like the whole rear section of an E46 BMW. So as long as you don't bend anything up here or forward, you're all right. But if your fuel cell's back here, right here in this back section, it's only got maybe a foot of distance of impact from the wall. I don't plan on hitting walls, but I do plan on having fun, and sometimes you hit walls when you have fun. So what I've determined, and I've seen some other people do this, is they will mount the fuel cell either right on top of the rear axle, rear diff, which I could potentially do, but then I'd have to tie into my rear strut towers, because you have to reinforce those to run a true coilover setup, like I'm going to do on this car. And so I think what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to cut this whole back of the car off, because I plan to do that anyways. It's weight reduction, makes it easier to work on, it's cleaner, and it's a race car. So once I do that, then I'm going to build like the rear structure back here, and I'm basically going to mount the fuel cell kind of on top of that structure, where it's almost forward enough, but not intruding past these rear strut towers, because I'm going to put a rear strut brace right there, but it'll sit kind of right there on top. It gives me at least probably 2 foot or more from the rear end, if in case I hit a wall or something. So yeah, that's what I think I'm going to do. But now I got to cut the whole back of the car open. Let's get it. So the tubing I've got is rectangle tubing. I think it's an 1/8 inch thick, so it's definitely solid. It's what most frames are made of, and actually on this BMW I'm finding that the thickness of this rear frame tubing is maybe an 083 or an 090 tubing. It's probably more of an 090 tubing, but I'm going to match it to an 1/8 inch thick rear crash structure. It's just stronger, and then from there I'll build out a welded tube, which is not as strong as this rectangle tube, and it's going to give before this rear crash structure would be affected or hit or bend. You want basically that welded tube is going to mount to the body panels, the rear bumper, and the side over fenders. And if you tap a wall or something, or another car hits you, you want that weaker material to bend and break before the actual crash structure. The crash structure needs to be basically solid and strong, just like the frame of the car. So this is what I'm going with. this is the general shape of the BMW E46 frame tubing. So I basically made these to make my welded patch like plates so that I can then layer on my rectangle tube. I don't really like how this sits. You can see that, you know, I could make this work, but then I'd have to weld in here on this back side of the new tubing, and it just doesn't look that clean. It doesn't really look that professional. So I'm gonna scratch this, and I'll show you what I'm working on now. I decided to put in a brace, a piece of DOM tubing. It's a roll cage tubing, leftover piece. And I'm going to use it as a brace to go in between the factory frame rails, basically, of the BMW back here. I'll show you what I'm working on. Okay, you can see the bar. It's basically sitting right in between the frame rails here. Oop. So I'm going to clean off some of that so I can weld it in there. Probably going to lift it a little bit and seat it back in here. And that'll be a really good brace. And then we'll weld on our plates right here, as like this on both sides. And then we'll have our rectangle tubing coming out here and back into the center. That'll be our rear crash structure. And then from there, we'll use some welded tube to come out here towards the bumper. And that's going to be the weaker part that will, you know, crush. But, I mean, hopefully it doesn't. We don't want to hit a wall. But if we do, that weaker welded tube is what will give. And then the rear crash structure will be strong and support the car and the weight transfer and the horsepower and everything that we got to do to it. So it's coming along pretty good. We're in the trunk. We've welded in this brace in between the frame rails here, and it turned out really good. Show you that. Some pretty decent welds there. This side looking good too. So got that welded in. Happy about that. Now I'm working on our plates that we're going to weld. If you can see it. Weld there to the frame rail. So I've gone ahead and marked these two lines that line up with the top of the BMW frame rail. And that'll help me keep it where I want it when I tack it in place. So it's coming along pretty good. Just used a speed square and a Sharpie. Measured the top, and now we're gonna weld it together.